right, we're going to get started. So if you're here, this is morning track B, Unleashing AI in the Enterprise. You take the previous panel on innovative moats and AI startups, and we think, okay, how can we flip everything there? So we had Don Sol, strategy, corporate strategy professor, MIT. The next session is going to be moderated by Doug Levin of HBS, entrepreneur in residence, faculty and lecturer, Yang Yang, MIT, HBS. And then we went from startups, and now we're going to more talk about kind of incumbent firms, large corporations, and how they are implementing and thinking about this on a more enterprise level. We have Jamie Teven again from Microsoft, Umang Shukla from Anthropic, and Sami Shalabi from Maven AGI. I think all three of them can kind of speak about building for enterprise, and then Microsoft especially, but the others as well, can also be able to speak about kind of implementing on the enterprise side. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So please join me in welcoming our new panel on Unleashing AI in the Enterprise: Doug Levin, Jamie Teven, Umang Shukla, and Sami Shalabi.
How's this? Oh, so much better. Okay,
Hello.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Doug Levin. I'm at HBS. And over the course of the next 40 minutes, we are going to explore unleashing AI in the enterprise. I hope many of you are familiar with the jagged edge, which is the application of AI into user land, and the differences between actual use, and everybody else who would like to use it and haven't yet either learned how to use it or are working toward using it. And so we've assembled a stellar panel to address some of the issues related to innovation and applications in the enterprise, but also addressing some of the risks connected to applying AI in the enterprise. So at this point, I'd like to introduce the panel. Sami, and what we'd like to, actually, let me start with Jamie. And if you could introduce yourselves briefly, and then we'll get into the question and answer.
I'm Jamie Teven, Chief Scientist and Technical Fellow at Microsoft. I'm responsible for driving research-backed innovation in our core products, and that includes the integration of AI and how AI is going to foundationally change work. I have a background in research, so I'm a scientist as well.
Hey everyone, Umang Shukla. I'm a member of the go-to-market team at Anthropic. I work with our strategic accounts to help identify the best applications for generative AI and push them through initial ideation, through implementation and road mapping, and eventually value generation. I am also an MBA, so excited to be back at an MBA conference. And my background prior to that was in physics, as well as a number of other SaaS and data science organizations.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sami Shalabi, co-founder of a company called Maven AGI. For the engineers in the room, this has nothing to do with the open source project. And we're pretty much working on reimagining human-intensive workflows, and we're hyper-focused on the support use case in large enterprise. Prior to that, I've done a few other companies. I used to run all of Google News for many years, and also an MIT alum.
Okay. So we have this stellar panel has a great deal of background in research as well as knowledge of the enterprise. And in the enterprise, what we see is efforts to innovate, efforts to do new applications of AI. And so what I'd like to do is ask the panel to first talk about the challenges in applying AI to the enterprise and specifically gaining competitive advantage, which is one of the top objectives that they're trying to make. Maybe we can start with you.
Yes, of course. So,
Sami, I couldn't remember which one.
one of the things we're hyper-focused on large enterprise, and kind of if you look at the macro view of this, all organizations are trying to be more competitive, cut costs, increase their overall profitability, and now you have this magical technology that emerged a couple of years ago where it's gotten tremendous consumer adoption that has actually led to them thinking about, well, what is our AI strategy? Something I haven't seen to this extent before is this general demand for how are we going to disrupt our overall organization and use this stuff effectively to become more profitable, reduce our overall cost, et cetera. And one of the things that when we've been talking to a lot of large enterprises, the thing they think about quite a bit is they see the potential, but they tend to struggle with trying to formulate the overall business case. And this is kind of one of the things that we spend a lot of time. It's like, okay, how is this going to change how we operate? How is it going to actually materially define the business case that would drive the overall adoption, and then kind of working through the triage to figure out how to use this technology overall. That's the first thing that we've been hearing about from a lot of large enterprises. The second is they're terrified of it. I mean, they read the news. What happened with a certain airline where it was starting to hallucinate. The concept of hallucinations, et cetera, is something that is of tremendous risk for them. And especially if you're giving AI proprietary or private data, is this going to leak? Are we suddenly going to accidentally, if it's using personal data, leak social security numbers in the public domain? So this is kind of the second big thing. The third one we hear quite a bit is, especially even with technology companies, is how do you platform your organization to leverage this technology? And for example, something we're seeing often is the VP of data science is now part of the buying process. So we get a lot of questions as how do you organize, how do you do the change management, how do you kind of evolve your organization to embrace this technology?
Jamie, perhaps you could share your experience with the introduction of both OpenAI as well as Copilot in the enterprise. How did enterprises adjust and set the stage for innovation?
Yeah, it's a great question, and Sammy brings up some of the key things that we're hearing from customers. So we really have had an opportunity to look across a lot of enterprise companies. 40% of the Fortune 100 companies have played with Copilot. And there's two main questions that we see coming up. One is around trust and data use. They're very concerned about how data is showing up. It's actually a place where a lot of our long-term enterprise strength comes to play, and that we have a lot of experience in managing compliance and privacy and security and sort of the complexities that come with that, essentially. But it's a really big question, and so it's been something that's always been there. And actually, as you start thinking about how companies even that haven't tried Copilot yet or deployed it, like one of the big things that they can do is really to prepare for this AI wave is making sure their data estate is in order and that they've got the permissions correct and that their data is online and available but permissioned properly. So that's one of the big topics. And then probably the other big topic is exactly this about like what does it mean to get ready for AI, how to prepare their workforce, how to bring, how will people know what they can do? What should they be doing to rethink their workflows and processes? And there, actually, it's really interesting. So I'm a researcher. I've been at Microsoft for 17 years and done research there that entire time. I've never seen our customers like so engaged in co-innovation. So we have a really significant customer research program going on with the Copilot deployment. And customers are actually like doing scientific studies. They're doing randomized controlled trials. They are like allocating Copilot seats to random subsets of the organization in order to do like statistically valid analysis of how it is being used. And so we're getting really good insights into sort of the ways that it can do, and that's feeding into how we're building the product. Like people don't know what to say to a language model, and so we're building in prompt support to help them figure out what to say. Organizations don't know who they should allocate seats to, and we're able to give good advice on that front.
Perhaps you can comment on Claude 3's introduction and the challenges of introducing a new generative AI to a large group of people who are familiar either with other generative AIs or the beautiful Claude?
Appreciate that. I would say first, I hope people like to root for an underdog. That's kind of a nice place to be. But I will say it's been fascinating. I'd reiterate everything Jamie is sharing with just there's so much ground swelling of desire to try out and pilot these tools. And in my experience, the challenge has been twofold. One is that perhaps people don't know the business case, and I think that's especially true because these models are impacting a slice of knowledge work that up until this point has not been automatable. It's just a completely different mindset for many of our customers to think about the regulatory and compliance issues and so forth. I think for Claude specifically, Claude is our large language model. It's Anthropic's GPT, as it were. It comes in a few different varieties now. And one of the things that I'm really excited about as we think about advancing the frontier and seeing these different layers is one thing we're trying to do with the Claude 3 family of models is address the need that it might not be the case that one model is appropriate for all types of use cases. So we've put out into the world 3 different sizes of Claude. Claude 3 Opus, which is our sort of largest and most capable. Claude 3 Haiku, which is our lightweight, fast, cheap version that should give the lowest latency responses. And Sonnet, which is kind of a happy medium. And I think that we're seeing a better understanding from these companies as they identify the core use cases they want to pilot for what level of complexity, sophistication, and cost they're willing to bear in order to realize that value and that benefit. So that's been one thing that's really exciting to me. I think the other part that I'll just chime in with, and this is certainly not a pat on the back, but everyone is advancing this frontier incredibly quickly. I think both in terms of the overall model capabilities, as well as how effective the models are at certain tasks, because people know how to prompt and embed it into core business processes. This whole wave really is a wave that we're riding very quickly, and I think it's been fascinating to see that over even a few short weeks or months.
Exactly. OpenAI on March 1st revealed that 1.6 billion users visited their website monthly. So that's a significant group of eyeballs that are hitting an LLM. So maybe Jamie and Sammy can answer this next question, which is comment for a moment on the use of external vendors and developers on the development and innovation of AI in the enterprise.
One of the approaches when we've been thinking about how to deploy it in the enterprise is it's very easy to walk in and do a demo, but walking in and really thinking about let's solve a real workflow, a real problem in the enterprise, and prove clear ROI. And one of the things, for example, that we have done to kind of mitigate this ROI use case is we help pretty much the overall automation around the entire support experience, everything from what users use to interact with support to co-pilots that coexist inside of their support tooling to insights for executives. So we built the whole workflow. But we've actually, one of our core insights is we always start with a very data-driven approach to solving this problem so you can hand feed them the ROI use case. The importance of this is that because you can't invent money in the enterprise. Like money, you're displacing something usually. It's either innovation budget, you're displacing human capital budget, and as a vendor who's trying to sell into the enterprise, you have to be very intentional where the money's coming from. And so that's kind of one piece of it. One other challenge is if you actually look at B2B SaaS companies, typically they're sold based on seats. And we're kind of in the middle of a business model disruption here because it's not about having more humans do stuff. It's actually the whole system is in some ways is being overall automated. And there are less people, so the seats model doesn't make a lot of sense because you're actually ending up with less folks using this stuff. And it's really kind of transforming to value-based sales. And kind of the way we think about that, it's much more about value. So I'll let you pick up.
Yeah, no, and Sammy makes a lot of great points. So I would echo a lot of that when you start thinking. And so, like, there's an interesting thing too. So in many ways, Microsoft is a vendor, and then Microsoft also works with a lot of vendors. And so both echoing the fact that the way that AI shows up in the enterprise is different now, in that it's no longer necessarily just the CIO that you're working with. It's no longer coming from the same budget or same spend when you're thinking about how an organization's going to purchase it. But then also thinking very much about how you can enable what we think a lot about how you can enable others as well to be successful in an organization. So how they can, we are very much creating an ecosystem that others can come and build on top of Copilot and integrate with that, create custom Copilots and custom GPTs and plugins. So that's a really important area as well, because I think in many ways, organizations, especially right now during this period of really significant transition, organizations have special needs. They have different kinds of regulations that they're operating in, different data, different systems that they have to integrate with, and being able to sort of customize to the particular needs of a given industry or segment or even role. We're seeing a lot more, like we have been thinking a lot about specific industries, but lately we're thinking a lot about different roles. How does the HR function change? How does legal function change? How does finance change? And how we can support that as well.
Let's tease out for a moment something that Sammy said, and maybe I'll ask you to first address the evolution of business models. Claude has a very elegant four-tier, I think, pricing model for its offering, including some very clever naming of Haiku and Sonnet, and that helps with the process. But how does Anthropic look at the evolution of the business model?
Are you asking about the business model for Anthropic as a vendor, or as the business model for integration of these technologies, or a little bit of both?
Both.
Okay. I think that in terms of business model, I probably don't have much to add beyond what Sammy shared. It is a different paradigm. It's this world in which a technology is unlocking so much in terms of efficiency benefits that you need a mechanism to track the impact that that's having in a given company. And so we always encourage all of our customers to be empirical about this in a couple of different ways. Jamie alluded to doing like these test and learn experimentation type trials. We want to make sure that we can point to the specific impact that a given AI application has, and note that we're building this scaffolding of many, many different types of applications across different competencies, different functions, and they'll fit together and be hopefully something truly transformative. As I think about the iteration of the business model for our customers, I think that the place where, companies are best suited to compete and generate transformational impact with AI most quickly is when you can apply an AI capability to your own existing core product or differentiator. So I think we hear a lot about the efficiency gains that come from things like, hey, we're helping to make our back office more efficient. We're seeing benefits for legal or HR or customer support or what have you. But I think that those companies that can really say, here is how AI makes our core differentiator and ideal customer profile different is really valuable. I can share one example, which is one of Anthropic's customers is Slack. And Slack has been beloved, obviously, for being just a really effective communication tool. But the challenge for users with Slack has always been you lose stuff in the feed, right? Power users are really good about building their shortcuts and keeping things bookmarked and what have you. But now with AI and large language models, we have something that's superhuman at searching data and classifying information differently than traditional search embeddings and distilling information and insights from it. And that's what Slack AI is aiming to do. It's trying to say, we can now change the way that people use our core product by taking advantage of where this technology has a uniquely outsized impact. And I think that that's a great example of where organizations are really going to go from just these sizable improvements in efficiency to like really changing the dynamic of how they can interact and interface with their end users.
Jamie, maybe you can tap into some of your research and talk about how the enterprise are upskilling technical and non-technical people in the enterprise to accommodate the new AIs.
Yes, skilling's a really big, important topic. So one of the things, I was talking a little bit earlier about some of the more successful ways to deploy AI within an organization. And one of the things that we're seeing lands well and actually really leads to, in part, I think because of the skilling opportunity there, is to deploy to whole teams at a time, because there's a lot of collaborative learning that goes on. And so like being able to be like, hey, guess what I did today? Like, let's try this, or, you should copy what I'm doing, is really successful and useful. We're creating, for example, a prompt library. We see customers do that and have that be quite successful, holding office hours, like just getting together. I talked earlier this morning a little bit about how when we first started thinking about integrating the model into our products, we would get together on a call and use it together. Like that opportunity to use the system collaboratively is really valuable as well.
Sammy?
One of the things we've been seeing is actually the way you deploy it is really interesting. So in our case, imagine walking into a Fortune 1000 company. Please give us access, give the AI access to talk directly to your customers, give us access to all your APIs and backend systems, and let it run. You can imagine, and you need to re-platform everything. The immediate reaction is, no, thank you. And what we found is, I say this to the team, what we're dealing with is a human problem to deploying AI. And it needs to start with, how do you establish trust, like you would with any human? And then as trust evolves, it leads to kind of deeper integrations, more automation. And what we found, for example, in kind of automating the entire support experience, is we start with a human in the loop, and they use for some of our, they use it for a month, and they're like, well, we're just hitting insert, and because we have a copilot that produces an automated response that the support agents can use to respond to their support tickets, and very quickly they get the trust, and then the next conversation is, how do we move this further upstream where we're not doing the, and it's all because we're taking a very, very data-driven approach to the problem. We have clear data. I mean, the data points we have is that typically a support agent can do about 20 tickets a day. That's why it's so astronomically expensive. It's like every company we've talked with has said the average cost of a support ticket, and anyone who's used support is like, there's a lot of challenges in the quality of the experience. It's like average is $40. And now we're kind of, when they start using co-pilots, they're going from 20 tickets a day to 20 tickets an hour, which is incredible gains. And the more you dig into it, for certain categories, they're literally just copy pasting, and the next conversation is, how do we just even deflect it all the way at the top?
Well, raising the issue of copying and pasting, why don't we turn to ethics? And what does the panel recommend, or as best practices and guidelines for the enterprise when it comes to ethics, biases in data, and other related issues? Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, this is something that I care a lot about, and was actually one of the things that attracted me to Anthropic, which was founded as an AI trust and safety research organization. I think there's a few different things. In our perspective, AI safety is about how people are going to use the model, and it is challenging to predict all the different ways that people are going to ask questions. We see news stories constantly of times where there are either annoying outcomes from a given language model, all the way to dangerous, misleading, actual brand risk or human risk, which we obviously want to avoid. And that's in the here and now, right? This isn't some far-fetched future. So as I think about where we want to really focus our attention, there's a few things. From our perspective on the model side, we want to make sure that Claude is as difficult to jailbreak as possible. And jailbreaking in this context just means having a model do something that it's not intended to do and going beyond the parameters of intended use. So that's sort of like a layer that we care deeply about. We do like a lot of red teaming internally to try to break our own models before they make their way to the public, just so we can try to assess how well it's behaving. Additionally, something that we do is called constitutional AI, which at its foundational level is we've programmed a version of Claude and trained it on a set of principles and morals tied to things like the UN Declaration of Human Rights and a few other core beliefs that we think are important. And we have that version of Claude watching the outputs of another version of Claude, and it's sort of like an additional layer even before it hits a human to make sure that the outputs are, as safe and trustworthy as we can be. I think that the thing that's really important, and one thing that we care about with this constitutional AI approach, is that the level of sensitivity or the exact guidelines for a given organization differ, and that's where every enterprise has to have its own set of governance and checks, things like human in the loop, things like making sure that if there is an output that is directly touching a human, it's been very carefully vetted in advance. It's about really having the empirical data around how well we are addressing these biases before anything hits production. I think that's an integral part of the development and deployment of any AI solution.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that. Like fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics have been a huge topic in AI for a long time. And one of the things that's really interesting right now are kind of the new risks that language models bring to the fore. So like bias has always been something that we look at in AI, and you think about building better data sets. It's actually a relatively well understood problem compared to some other things. Jailbreaking is a new problem. Misinformation and hallucination come to the fore a lot with language models. So it does become really important to start thinking about how you mitigate that and all up and down the stack. And so Umang talked a little bit about like at the model level, there's a lot you can do directly there. And you can actually even train into the model weights, which I'm sure you do a lot of RLHF and stuff like that. And sort of the monitoring that happens right around that. But then you've got at the orchestration layer a lot happening as well, thinking about how you're doing that, and even then at the user experience. And it becomes really important. Like in many ways, you don't want, it's not on individual companies or organizations to be making the decision for the rest of the world about how a model should behave and what's right. And so like it's really important to think about how we put a lot of this in the hands of the end user so that they can express what they want and are creating what they want and aren't accidentally exposed to harms, but are creating the content that they believe is valuable. And in the hands of the administrators, the people who, of an organization or in the governments, so like speaking from an enterprise context, we do a lot around the admin controls and how you can control that at that level as well.
And we're happy consumers of those content, those controls. The other thing I want to kind of just because I come from the applied side of it, where we're actually using this technology, and there's a variety of techniques where you can, for example, one approach is to fine-tune models, which has some of its challenges. You can depend less on the model. So, for example, RAG is a really interesting approach to kind of constrain the use case so that it's much more controlled. And there's like a whole variety of approaches where you depend on the foundation models to kind of support this stuff, but then you can also constrain the use cases in a way that helps you have more control over the results.
You and I are going to follow up on RAG.
Yeah.
So in just a few minutes, we're going to select a couple of people from the audience to ask questions of the panel. But before we do, I'd like to turn it back to Jamie, and maybe you could comment about last week and the Copilot challenges related to imagery, and also in general, this is not just a Copilot problem. This is a challenge for all LLMs and even SLMs. So maybe you could comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's always challenges happening right now across the spectrum. So, it even takes a little bit for me to pull up the specific example that you're talking about because there's always some drama. I sponsor responsible AI across the organization and deal with every piece of drama. One of the things, so it's actually interesting to think about what's different about responsible AI or some of these challenges in a consumer versus a commercial context as well. And actually in enterprise context is different. You have much less adversarial use. You know, people aren't going to be trying to break the system. If you go create a racist image or something, like, you're going to get fired. That's not your, like, that's, you have a responsibility to your organization about the content you're creating. The privacy, the risk of data leakage is very different in an enterprise context. One of the things that I find really valuable is the fact that we span consumer and commercial. It actually allows us to learn a lot from the consumer space where you do have more adversarial use. And so in many ways, a lot of our systems have been really battle tested at scale because they're used by millions of people trying to do all sorts of interesting things about it. So I'm not sure which of the specific issues you're talking about. I'm happy to address it if you have one.
Okay, we'll come back to that in just a second. If anybody has a question, why don't you step up to that microphone? Yeah.
Hello. Well, I have two questions. One for you as regarding enterprise, for organizations that are building this whole stack of technology on something that wasn't even in existence maybe a couple years ago. And how do we, like, do you worry that this might change again in 2 years where you don't have big models, you don't have this whole stack of things that you've built you don't need, and you need something new? How do you reconcile with that risk? And the second one is, as people, as society, what do we teach our kids now? If they don't need to do math, if they don't need to do coding, where do we start? And what sources of information can you really trust? How do you tell them what to trust?
Yeah, I really appreciate both those questions. So starting from the first one with just this very tactical question of how is our stack going to continue to change? What investments are we making now that are future-proof versus not? I will say that one thing that I feel pretty lucky about, and I have a somewhat myopic view because I'm working primarily with large enterprise customers who have made significant investments in their digital transformations in the 2000s and then cloud migrations in 2010s, that data hygiene is incredibly important for access in these language models, but I don't think the bar is crazy high. I don't think that there's all that much more stuff that many enterprises need to do to begin experimenting with foundation models and LLMs. Yeah, I would look to Jamie for confirmation on that, but I think that that's true. Maybe I'll...
Yeah, and actually, I'll just build on that real quick. And then, but like, yes, absolutely. So one of the things that's really important is, even though it feels like we're in this really fast moment, it's something that we've been building to. And so there has been, like, this AI research has been happening. We've just like hit past the tipping point. The digital transformation, the move to the cloud has been happening, and we're just at the point now where it can be useful. I actually really like this quote when I think of how fast this is. I like this quote from the Hagakure. I don't know if anyone here has read the Hagakure, but it's this like collection of wisdom from the 1700s from a samurai on his deathbed. And so it's got all these interesting little quips. And there's one that I like in particular that says, in the words of the ancients, one should make his decisions in the course of 7 breaths. And that doesn't mean that one should act rashly or make, dumb decisions. It is that one should have essentially meditated on the topic such that when it comes time to move fast and make those decisions, you're ready and prepared. And so I think this moment that we're living in many ways, it's only possible because we have gotten to where we are and we're able to move quickly now.
I subscribe to just listening to the all-in guys, and after that, I'm fully knowledgeable about everything.
So, a perspective on at least that first question, which is, we're now at a point where when you were building AI in the past, I used to be at Google. The reason we had some of the best AI is because we had a tremendous amount of data. And that was the moat, which was like you had data. Now, anybody who wants to do anything, you're just an API call away from the best models in the world. And it's a very empowering situation. Yes, there's replatforming. We're going to reinvent user experience and we're going to reinvent the stacks evolving. All these things are true, but it's available in a way that historically, I mean, it's similar to mobile, it's similar to the internet. You can now build these things in really interesting ways at tremendously lower cost and with tremendous impact. So it's really about like pick the right problems, pick the highest impact problems. And we're just, I mean, we are in a state where it's going to change. I mean, the future of work is changing. The way organizations, I mean, we're building our company, because we're paying for every AI tool out there, everyone's significantly more productive. And that's going to change.
So one more question from the audience, and then we're going to ask the panel one final question. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Eon Mathis, early stage investor. So really quick question. When you think about AI and the implications of who benefits from this, we've seen some of these open source models really only benefit the people that can pay to play. So how do you think about other enterprises that don't really have those deep pockets and making sure that there's access throughout the entire ecosystem? Thank you.
I'm happy to answer that. But it's a great question, and I think really foundational to making sure that we get this right. We talked about business models a little earlier, and one of the things that's interesting, we are undergoing a business model kind of revolution, but one of the things I like at Microsoft, we actually very uniquely have a broad range of business models. So we have consumption-based, we have advertising-based, we have seat-based, and a lot of when we think about broad access, advertising is the way that we reach a broad community right now. So you do need to think about what are the business models in order to bring this technology to the world. There's actually other pieces too about one of the things I think about a lot is how do we do inference in different languages? How do we customize the experience to be culturally appropriate in different geolocations in different areas? And so that's another place where we invest a lot. It's interesting, these large models, because they are so large, work quite well in a bunch of different languages. So Copilot is the first product that we've released, that AI-based product that we've released out the door into all of our tier 1 languages. And we're quickly coming on to our tier 2 as well. So I think there's a real thinking about how to bring this to, actually, and it's kind of an interesting challenge too. It's pretty rare you have this technology that goes out to the whole world out the gate as well. It's part of what makes it really challenging. We've got a lot of different regulation and a lot of different thinking about what it means in different locations as well.
So it is true that this new generation of AI technology broke software economics. That's a fact. It used to build, if you're building a software product, the cost of doing a database query is count the zeros because it's so cheap. Now it costs real money. And in the case, for example, enterprise, it may not be appropriate to solve all use cases. That's why, for example, we went after the support use case. It's high cost, it's very high value, the return on investment is there. That's where we are today. With time, the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, the Microsofts are going to find more algorithmic improvements, more hardware improvements. It's going to continue to, in the last, year, the cost has gone down 10x. And it's going to continue to improve. And we're hearing in the next couple of years, or in the earlier keynote, in the next couple of years, that it's going to be running on your mobile phone. So we are in this middle. Where we are, it is truly expensive, and we're going to have to triage which use cases it's going to solve. And in our case, we decided to go after high value ones, but it's going to evolve and it's going to become more ubiquitous. It's just a matter of time.
Each panelist in the next 5 years, which emerging AI technology will make an impact and make a difference. It could be currently on the market or new ones that you want to talk about. Jamie.
Well, so I get very excited about the small language models. If you think about, and we have, for example, Phi is our small language model that we offer. If you think about what's encoded in a language model, there's a lot of different things there. So one is the ability to do reasoning and sort of think about things. Another is world knowledge. Like there's a lot of knowledge that gets captured in those weights. Another maybe style or how, the way that things are presented or what a conversation looks like. And increasingly we're getting good at being able to distill particular aspects of that. So Sammy was talking about RAG and the ability to pull in context, either your current context, like the document you're working on, or, context from a web search. Like in many ways, you don't need that context embedded in the model weights. What you do need is the ability to both know how to go out and get that information from the appropriate tools, so like tool selection and query generation, and then the ability to munge and process the information that you pull in. But if you can build that, but take that piece, build it into the model, you can get very fast and efficient. And so I think we're going to see real understanding of the rich ecosystem and then building the models to be amazing and awesome and fast and efficient.
I'm really excited, I think, just around, language models are already superhuman at the unit of information for our species, which is language. But the way in which we take in that information is with our eyes and ears. And so as multimodal models get better and better, I think we're not that far away from a language model or an AI being able to see and interact with an entire GUI in the same way that a human would, and have these really true agentic workflows where they can operate your computer because they're seeing the screen, reading the data, reasoning on it, and taking actions on it in the same way a human might. So I don't know if that's 5 years or a little further or a little closer, but I'm super excited.
Very good. Sammy, bring it home.
So there are really two things I'm beyond excited about. The first is these models having infinite memory. If you're kind of in the enterprise use case, a customer is not one interaction. It's like a relationship that lasts a long time. And the models being able to remember and pick up on a need you had a year ago would be incredible. And we're starting to see this with like larger and larger context, and like that's going to grow. And like the world where AI remembers every interaction, very excited about that. And the second is I think we're going to get a massive unlock in use cases once we start to figure out how to do actions at scale. Right now it's information retrieval, and we're starting to see like some action, and I don't think the ship has landed on how that actually works, but really doing actions at scale in a consistent way, I think that's going to be like a massive unlock in terms of use cases.
Excellent. Let's all thank the panelists for excellent answers to this question. And thank you all for attending.